very special and famous, and
Oh,
hard to even know how are you gonna manage to keep all of the audio on one beautiful tape. But Phil Black is here with us today, famous from the Doffers, I think is the name of the podcast, the Doffs, the Deconstructor.
Yeah, that's something like that.
And an amazing Game Economist podcast, which I think you guys have to listen to. It's one of my favorites right now.
Shout out to the 5 of our fans that are that are still listening.
No, it's 6. There's a new one. I saw him on the other day. There was a guy who said he liked it too.
Oh, thanks. Give me his address. I can send him a t-shirt.
Really glad to have you on board. The three of us, me and Tom and Phil, are working on a project that we're really excited about. We're here to talk about it. We're starting something called the Experimentation Group. And we're going to start off with talking a little bit about an old project inside of King, started end of 2014, beginning of 2015, called the Experimentation Group. Back inside of there, we used to call it the EXG. Talk a little about the history of that and talk more about our mission.
That's how I initially met you, David, is I remember that I had a saved Google search for free-to-play economics. And I would say once every 3 months, I would get a ping. Absolutely. I would get a ping to my Gmail. I still get pings to my Gmail. Normally, it's just master students who ran a survey and was doing their master thesis, and they would just survey people. But once in a while, you'll find a gem. And I remember when that quantity discounting paper with Steve Levitt came out, and I remember reading it and saying, holy shit, someone did something actually legitimate that's not a survey of undergrads. And I said, who is this David Nelson guy? Now that was the 5th question I asked after I'm oh, Steve Levitt. Oh, wow. I'm this David Nelson guy. I looked you up on LinkedIn. And I was oh man, I got to talk to this person. And what did I do? Did I shoot you a LinkedIn message? I must have shot you a LinkedIn message. I was going through that paper. It was legit. And the only evidence I had beforehand that I had to hold on to, there were 2 pieces, was Giannis. If you remember him, he was the game economist hired by Valve. He was the one who did the thing where he started the blog and did the 2 blog posts, then pieced out. And there was Edward Castronova, if you remember him, who was more of an academic and really didn't go into the private industry. But this felt like a legitimizing force, and I had to know more about it. And I think we spent an hour chatting.
Yeah, there's one other person that got in touch with me. You got in touch with me and Dr. Julian, who was recently on your podcast also, right?
Absolutely. A ton of fun to talk to.
And there was a guy in Activision at the time, the 2 of you, who was also trying to do some of this stuff.
Christopher Gao, yeah. We used to grab lunch in Santa Monica.
And that's when you and I first met. Is that I was there for an Activision Blizzard meetup, and you came and met up with me and him, and we didn't we walk to? We hung out
no. It was in a hotel lobby. Yeah. It was in a hotel lobby, and you were whipping out. I think it was Clash Royale at the time, and you were telling me all these offers were stupid. None of them work. They're all dumb.
No, anybody that knows me knows I've never said anything was stupid. Come on, disrespectful. That's great.
So I guess you grew this team inside of King, this experimentation thing. Tom, when did you come into the picture? Were you there at the origin?
It was quite soon after I joined King that my boss at the time was what was she always talking about? The 3 wise men. She was God, we just hired these guys. There's David Nelson and Jan Wedekind, I think was another one. And maybe Leovold, I think was the 3rd. She called you guys the 3 wise men. And she was Tom, David's coming to town. You've got to meet this guy. And so I was right. Jumped onto Blue Jeans that we had at the time, pre-Slack. And hey, David, formal, here I am. You come into town, let's have a meeting. We had a meeting. And it's basically 25 minutes of you showing me that Anchorman film. With that guy.
It's a good movie. Anchorman's a good movie.
It really isn't. It was so awkward because I was just wanting to impress my new boss. Yeah, I had this really constructive meeting and I'm sat there just watching Anchorman and just you're wanting me to laugh. And I'm oh my God, so lame. And then at the end, anyway, after all of this awkwardness,
and you didn't want to
you
laugh.
were oh, I've got a session with Steve Levitt next week and you should come. And I was what?
See, that's what I was doing. This is an important mechanic. I'm gonna make soup out of shit, or that's not the right way to say it. But the thing is that if you're a lot of times, inside of organizations, you can see that things become politically interesting for a while. Politically interesting is not fair, but all of a sudden the topic becomes really interesting. It's like, oh, this is the thing. And then people kind of gather towards it. But a lot of times when that happens, you get people kind of like getting together in an organization isn't really aligned on what they want to get done. And then it's like, it just becomes like kind of bulky and not efficient, and you don't get a lot of really high quality work. So I do think, although I'm not sure that I did that on purpose, but I do think it is a good idea if you're working in a startup or in a big company to try to figure out, whoever comes to you and says, I want to work with you, is there a legitimate interest to work with you on the topics you're legitimately interested in? Because if not, you end up with a whole bunch of sort of politicized, and there's infighting in the group because they didn't really join for the same reason. So I'd say that through a long time at King, I had a habit of just sort of acting in a way that people that were maybe only superficially interested in the topics I was interested in got bored and walked away. I mean, I think you could feel that, Tom, in our team. Our team was mostly people that were actually committed to stuff and were kind of like into things. And I think that's probably because like there was no way to kind of get into the team unless you're really fired up about doing what we were doing.
Exactly right. And the funny thing is, so when we launched this podcast, like I genuinely, I mean, obviously, because it's been years now, like find all this stuff really interesting. And then so I shared the podcast with my wife and she's like, you guys are geeks. David's a nerd. And I'm like, what?
I mean, a real quick thing about what we did with, the big part, experimentation really was like a sort of an effort to try to invest in stuff that really mattered for players. And at the time, we'd had a bunch of games that were doing well, but we weren't really delivering new, interesting experiences to people inside the games, or really working on their core experience. We're doing some of it, but not a lot of it. We're doing translations for other geos. We were putting the games on Kindle and stuff like that. And the beginning of this whole like fight back started with me saying, like, I think we can get other voices to come in and look at these games. And I was out there saying, like, hey, let's go find like anybody that we can find that would come in, take a look at our games and give us a new, fresh opinion. And that's how we got in touch with Steve Levitt. I just wrote to him. I'd had a connection with him through an old friend of mine. And he came over and just started going through stuff. And the fun part is almost everything that he suggested that we do didn't work. Like the discounts didn't work and a bunch of other stuff didn't work. And I think that one of the things I'm really grateful for, rather than it not working and him defending why it's somebody else's fault or it really does work, it's you that, you didn't do any of that. He went like, oh shit, none of this works. That's crazy. It was a very open response to it. And I think that led us also to sort of kick off the start of Experimentation Group inside of King as just being like, well, let's stay open like that. What does work? What doesn't work? And there's no need to play defense on it. Let's just try to figure these things out. So, when we launched, like we got to work with three game titles. At the time, it was a game called Diamond Digger and a game called Pyramid Solitaire Saga and Bubble Witch 1. And we started working with these games and trying, crazy tests. And the first thing we did was hard level labeling. We just decided to try to make the game less abstract. We would label which levels were hard. We didn't do any weird stuff. There's nothing weird. There's just labeling it. That's all there is.
And no one was doing this at the time.
No, there's nothing like that. And it was fascinating because it was super small. There were people that were against it. The first version of it said like special challenge, and you'd barely notice that it was like that. I redid the art and put skull and fire on it, sent it back to the artist being like, scare people. Rawr! And the artist was like, God, you're horrible. And I was like, I don't disagree, but could you help me?
So there's no theory to start this. There's no theory. It was just like, let's, but you must have had some intuition that this is the right thing to do, because there's a million things you can tweak, you can change, you can remove, you can add. Why did you choose this one?
I think a lot of these things, there was a lot of that kind of stuff already going on. And we were talking about that kind of stuff. We did things like that later also. But I think the core feeling was people are playing these levels every day. They're completely abstract. I remember just being shocked. We're sitting in a company that's like, a multi-billion-dollar company, right? And with people that are, people like Stefan Kurgan's one of the most professional and intelligent people I've ever been around. The guy is top notch. And he's discussing how many lollipop hammers we're selling. And I'm like,
Best part about working in this industry.
Why am I the only one laughing at this? You're having a serious conversation about lollipop hammer storage amongst players. Anyway, so So I kind of felt like it's so abstract. Why don't we give them something that's like, I mean, why don't we just like find a way to make, relate to it? Like so it's hard. It's the basic thing. Here's a level. It's hard. Uh-oh. So what we were shocked by was you're running this A/B test, and we got these comments. That's one of my favorite one of the review things in an app ever. Somebody wrote like, I'm laying in bed next to my wife. She gets these hard levels to play, and I don't get any hard levels. It's not fair. And that was when you were like, it's not fair. So you want them.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the things you start to uncover is that like short-term goals, being challenged, like having something to look forward to in the mid short-term, midterm, long-term, these things matter in these games. And that's, I think, what we started like unpacking.
So you're telling me there's an asymmetric information problem that you're trying to solve with hard level labeling. And then there's there's like traditional game design stuff. Like, isn't this the theory of games? I don't know. I keep trying to force a thesis on your group, and you keep trying to reject it. But to me, it's atomism, right? This is Aristotle realized. This is like take the atom, break everything down to its atoms, and then just keep removing everything, and whatever's left. If it's still if the animal is still alive after removing all the different parts, then you found what makes it tick, right? You can remove the kidney, right? You can remove the kidney, a person can still survive. Clearly, that's not the most important thing. You can remove an arm, you can remove a leg, you can't remove a head, they'll die. You can't remove a heart, they'll die. But we now know those are the things that like keep us alive. Isn't that the thesis of experimentation? What keeps you alive?
Okay, let's do a. There's one of the statements you hear all the time in games. In games is that it's art and science brought together, especially in free to play. I mean, it's art and science, and all this engineering and arts. So I mean, I think one of the hard things is keeping an analytical base on stuff, which I think is what you're doing, and really being quite clear on it and structured on it. This matters, this doesn't. Here's approximately how. But it's also like a constantly evolving thing. So you're doing that to an animal, right? You're thinking of it like an animal. Like if you cut off the head, it actually won't work. But sometimes in games, if you cut off the head, all of a sudden it does work. I mean, if you take a look at Minecraft, like the whole thing, I mean, you tell me you're going to release a game that's like pixely and kind of weird and there's no point to it. No one's going to do it. That's not what games is about. And then it's like, oh, actually, no, it is also that. So it's a really interesting, I really do believe in this. Instead of art and science, I think I like creative and analytical. Be analytical, cut things up and stuff, but sometimes turn it all upside down and be like, I don't know, let's try this completely different angle. And I think if you keep that creative momentum along with analytical momentum, you've got something. But if one of the two win and just strangle the other, you get sort of like, you get stagnation. It doesn't really work.
No, I completely agree with you. And we were talking about like Quentin Tarantino at the top of the hour. Like, what does Tarantino do? He sits down, he watches a bunch of movies, but he just doesn't sit there and watch them. He breaks them down, he deconstructs them, right? And he does that with introspection, right? He thinks about what he's thinking about. He thinks about the movie, and he tries to rejig it. And like, what is that? Is that analytical? Is that creative? What is that? Well, it's greater than both of those things. It's like the highest thing you could possibly do is do something like that, right? Because it doesn't just straddle the line. It's not two lines. It's one thing. It's a sum that's greater than it's each individual parts. And I don't think you don't need sequel to do analytics. You don't need to watch dolphins having sex, which Aristotle did, to be analytical or to do science. I think a lot of it can come from just like sitting down, introspection, thinking about how these things fit together, and then turning the toilet upside down.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know where the. I mean, I don't know about turning toilets upside down, but I think you really should. I installed a toilet when I was last visiting my mom. That was one of the more interesting. Like, you should really look into like where does all the shit go at some point in life. Helps you relate to the whole, but not going to derail onto that. I think the willingness to like break things apart and put them together is great. There needs to be a creative aspect to it sometimes. Sometimes you should use exactly the analytical tools to build something up again, but sometimes you shouldn't. And in part of the ways, one of the things that we were doing with Experimentation Group was avoiding predictable uplifts. So what happens, I think, often when you're managing a live game or a live product is you get into this like, okay, I know that this thing I'm going to put in will create this much. And if the leadership team has a requirement on you to make sure that whatever you do, it's definitely positive, I can put something into a game that's always positive. It's just going to have to be really little. You you can find a way to always do something positive. It'll be small. If you have a requirement of like, I want real growth in this title, you need to be able to do things that are negative too. You need to be able to try something. You need to be able to maybe remove something or try something that has some more risk in it. And a lot of that inspiration is not going to come necessarily just from analytical work. It's going to come from some creative thinking, which is not always like, A plus B, and then we get this. It's more like, well, I removed something and then I turned this thing differently, or I approached it from a different angle. So I'd say, like any live business, you need to kind of keep a certain stream alive in your work, in your product work, that is creative at heart, that uses analytical tools to open up creativity.
And I remember the goal was always to have a significant impact, whether that be negative or positive. Like, we're not interested in 0 or 3 or 4. We want 10 or 15 or 20 plus or minus, because either way you've learned something, right? Like, if people really hate something, you've found like a raw nerve there. You've found something which you can riff on further.
And that's a really important thing. I think also, if you don't say something like, we're uninterested in plus anything below 5, like in reality, if you get a plus 3% gross bookings things, you're going to take it and you're going to put it in and you're going to use it, right? But like, if you tell the team trying to come up with an idea, I'm uninterested in 0 to 5, it forces a different, like, you have to think in a different way. You have to put different things on the table, So you need to say no to something in order to open up the other thing. If you never say no to 0 to 5, you're only going to get plus 0.3, plus 0.7 minor optimizations.
So Tom and David, you've gone through the gauntlet at King. You developed this experimentation method. You had those wins. I mean, hard level labeling. They tell you at the first day you try to interview for the experimentation group. This whole hard level labeling thing came out of this group. What's next? What are you going to do with this playbook? Is it going anywhere? What's the experimentation group? Tom, you were talking about at the top of the hour. What's the next mission?
There's a bunch of shit going on. There's a bunch of stuff going on in mobile games that is the same. It's a lot of stuff that just looks the same. There's a lot of carbon copying going on. There's a lot of things that have been developed by teams that did well, and then games are put together using just pieces of other games. And it's not even there's nothing new in it. And it's time for the whole industry to start doing things that surprise people, find new angles. There are a ton of live games out there right now with enough users and enough players to actually be doing things that are interesting, running tests, turning things on its head, looking for new opportunities. Look at one of the biggest hits, right? Toon Blast, no saga, right? It came right from Toy Blast. Toy Blast had a saga, Toon Blast didn't.
Saga map. Let's clarify for the listeners. There's a map you walk around. It's like Candyland. Everyone thought that was the most important thing. I was just reading a Novik piece, which quotes you extensively, by the way, David. And one of the things they double down on is the importance of the saga map. And I just sit there shaking my head over and over again, like, oof, no.
Oh my God. There's another anecdote here, isn't there, about when we did that experiment? And I mean, we don't have to name names, obviously, but it was hilarious. Like, we had this experiment, we were discussing it, like, let's take the saga map out, and this individual who remained unnamed completely lost it, stormed out of the meeting. This is a terrible idea. You're going to kill the game. And then what happened? It was like a little blip, wasn't it? Like a kind of few percent down, but.
It's still my favorite quote. If you do that, retention will go to 0. And I said, 0? And he was standing up in a different room on a video call, but 0! And he hit the table. And I said, you mean nobody will accidentally on day 7, like, butt dial the game? No one! Like, no one! I'll take that bet.
This to me is exactly the mission of the experimentation group, and like why the three of us has come together. Discover what really matters to your players. And there are certain things that become religion in games, that it's this thing that drives players to the game. It's this particular feature, it's this part, it's that part. And when you start to peel back these different layers, you discover that perhaps it's not exactly constructed the way you thought it was, and that it exists in players' head differently than how you've imagined the value proposition. And one of the ways we can understand what that value proposition is in the actual minds of players is to, starting cutting pieces off the animal. And that is a discovery process that I think is best aided by experimentation. And that saga map story is really important, right? Because it really didn't matter. And not only did it not matter, but when you start to drop those things, you open up your playbook and you potentially reduce your costs, and you can focus on, again, what really matters to your players. Which maybe in this case, now that the saga map's gone, maybe it's just making levels, or maybe it's difficulty, or maybe it's boosters, or maybe it's art. There could be a lot of other things, but you certainly have found something that you shouldn't spend resources against, and that's important for firms. That ultimately helps grow their games. I'm sure Toon Blast looks different with and without the saga map when they think about their roadmap and their art production, and ultimately just like the complexity of making that product when you can strip things down to their component parts.
Yeah, you had two separate things, of course. You had Toy Blast that had it right next to it, and the two games drove different. I mean, I'm sure they shared learnings, but they
Toy Blast is dead these
they're
days,
both
right?
huge games. I don't know.
It's holding on.
Yeah, they're both Toy Blast and Toy Blast are still there. The another good example of it, real quick, and I should remember the game. Phil, what's the game that you rant on about on every podcast that you're on about? It's on Steam and it's like low, like it's like lower quality graphics, but it's like Battlefield.
Stumble Guys. Oh, Battle Bits.
Yes. I mean, that's I think another good one. The main question of that one is: does all this fancy graphics do they matter to people or not? You know. And I mean, the answer doesn't have to be yes or no. It's not black and white, but it turns out maybe there's a group of people that it doesn't matter that much to. And you can create all sorts of other things because you're not doing that. And you can explore a bunch of stuff. There are commercial opportunities, real ones, big ones, behind each thing that you take away and you try a different angle on.
It's sometimes the answer is dumb, right? Which is perhaps not only were graphics not helping Battlefield, perhaps it was hurting Battlefield because it reduces the pool of players who can play. You need a pretty high powered PC to be able to put Battlefield together. Not only that, you need 140 gigs. And BattleBit's what, like 10? 10, and it can run on your 10-year-old MacBook Air. And people struggle to accept that because you get wed to certain ideas. You get wed to certain ways of thinking, and like you need to be able to punch through that. And sometimes it takes these market experiments for people to really drop their dogmas.
And the thing which I found initially interesting, so I was coming to the Experimentation Group from an insights background, from like player research, and you kind of alluded to it at the top of the podcast, Phil. It's like a lot of the time you can only, like, the findings are illogical or irrational. That's the right word. And so if you were to ask a player, do you want better graphics? They'd probably say, yeah, of course I do. Like, I hate these graphics, they suck. Or if you were to ask a player, if I was to tell you that this next level is hard, are you more likely to pay for end of level and like extra lives at the end of the level? They'd say, no way, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? That's so dumb. But it's only by doing these experiments and putting kind of them out there in the world for people to react to that you actually really understand like how people behave.
And this is a good. I think, harping more on hard level labeling. I mean, having now played, I don't know how many, God knows how many levels, 100,000 levels with hard labels in the progression somewhere. I'm happy when I see it. When I see a hard level showing up, I'm like, ooh, a super hard level showed up. I'm like, and I react to it like emotionally, and I get engaged and I look for it. And that isn't an experience that we understood when we were pitching it. Like when we were so there is something too, I think, taking something that you're not sure of, but you're mining in an interesting area. Like with hard level labeling, I mean, this is the thing they do all the time. They hit the play button and they play a level. That's what players do. It's what we care about when we're playing these puzzle games. So you take something that is a high impact spot where people are there and they're doing it all the time, and you do some change to it that changes the experience and the relationship to it. That is a good place to mine. I mean, if you can always take a look at those things and figure out if they matter or not, either by reducing them or changing them or whatever. And I mean, you need the best thing about, mobile casual is the best place for this, or hyper casual or hybrid casual also, because you could do experiments fast with lots and lots of people playing them. I mean, if you're making some sort of AAA game, HD game is, I guess, the term. It's huge and it takes a lot of time and it's hard. And I haven't really thought through about how to get experimentation done in that. I spent some time at one point talking to the Overwatch team about how I thought they should experiment in Overwatch. I was the least popular person at the at that
You've got a stash that story. I definitely want to ask about that shit on a Game Economist cast. That's an hour and 30 minutes right there.
particular. Sometimes there's a couple of really fun conversations about how to do that. But we can talk about in mobile games. There's all sorts of room for it, and there's room to do it right now. There are tons of live games that are not optimized, that are not doing like and releasing sort of like things that teams think are playbooks from the big companies or what they've seen, and they're kind of putting them in sort of a copy paste. But the other players have already seen them, so they don't really care about it that much and not reacting to them much. They're getting lower and lower return from each one of these playbook things added. And they could all do an experiment this week that would give them an insight into how their game could really evolve. They could do it this week.
And I think that brings us to the initiative. The three of us have come together to launch the Experimentation Group. Tom, what is it that we're actually doing?
So, circling back, we believe that we could advance the gaming industry as a whole, like the whole thing, by adopting the Experimentation Group approach to how you make games, like how you learn about your players. We believe that going in and working with a team to kind of ship some experiments super rapidly, ask the right questions, have the right structure in place, do the right analysis, iterate the process over time, we'll be able to kind of start to help individual games learn about their specific players, but actually sharing that approach widely among the industry will allow everybody to learn, like, this is how it works. It's not about copying and pasting what somebody else is doing. It's about having the right process in place, asking the right questions, looking at the data in the right way to understand how your players work. And maybe that is a kind of copy and pasted version of a feature from another game, or maybe it's something completely different.
And I think we all believe that there's an opportunity to go deeper, to have your game with minor tweaks uncover what your players are really looking for and what they're missing. And the reason that you're not getting the numbers that you want. They're there. You're going to have to remove something or do something radical that you're not prepared, you haven't thought about before. And I think we can seed companies with these things. If you join the program, we'll give you some ideas on how to do it. And then we'll publish this stuff. And then back to Phil's point, we'll move the whole industry forward together, because we'll talk about not only the methodology, but the insights that'll change how we make really great products for people.
So the launch of the Experimentation Group, we want to do this for free. We want to partner with game studios that want to understand what really matters to their players and share that with the industry. And so what we're willing to do, what we want to do is find some people to work with, ship those experiments super fast, but tell people, like, this is what we're thinking of doing. What do you think? And have a dialogue about, does this make sense? Because quite often it is irrational and it doesn't make sense. And so it's interesting to kind of gather those, have that discussion amongst people that think they know what they're talking about, to see. And then as we go, we'll all learn, right? Like, this is not a zero-sum game. If the studio that we work with finds a massive hit, then they benefit, but they don't lose if they share that insight with somebody else. The somebody else also benefits, like everybody wins. And so that's how we want to start. Like, let's have a massive discussion and let's share this best practice and learn together as an industry.
And did you say for free?
I did say yes, Phil. It is for free.
Wow. Did I sign up for that? Do we all agree to that?
David said it. The disruptor.
Free-ish. I think this is also an important stand that we're taking as a group. There is this sort of there's a line of thinking that's going on right now that mobile games is kind of going down, and this is driven by ATT and by the IDFA stuff, and what Apple's doing, and discoverability is getting harder, and privacy, and that means the mobile games are going to go down, and we're not sure how long until they go up again or if it's going to work. And I think, although I'm not going to say that that's not a driver of it, I think one of the biggest drivers of this is that there's no fresh, interesting experiences coming in. That there's a lot of the same, over and over again, the same. And I think the cure for the whole industry to make all boats start to rise is to start to really look at what do players really want, and how can we deliver a fresh experience to people that surprises them and gets them excited and has them wanting to play these games, and not just sort of sticking with the same boring stuff or getting sort of jaded and going back to social media or Twitter arguments or whatever else people do. But like, how can games be exciting and a fresh place for people to spend their time?
And when we've talked about this, a lot of people have been skeptical. A lot of studios are sometimes skeptical about, hey, these people are going to come in, they're going to be at no cost, and they're going to run some powerful
Did you
experiments.
say no cost?
No cost. That's right. Free, Free, free. And we're going to come in, we're going to run these experiments, and your game is going to grow. It's going to grow and you're going to make more revenue. But we are going to share these results publicly with you. It is a collaboration. And I think what people need to realize is that the games industry is as much about collaboration and cooperation as it is competition. And so if you're skeptical about whatever findings we have together becoming public and potentially benefiting your competition, I guess what I would say is it's already happening. This is what happens when you have knowledge spillovers, when you have when you have people in Los Angeles, or we have Stockholm or Berlin, wherever these gaming hubs are. Employees move from company to company, and when they move from company to company, they take their knowledge with them. They have these knowledge spillover effects. I mean, hard level labeling, it may have started in King, but now it's in every single match 3 game, and that's without any of this stuff becoming public. And so you have these knowledge spillovers. The only issue is that they happen behind doors, and ultimately, like, those knowledge spillovers benefit the entire industry. Everyone becomes more productive. The entire industry benefits from that growth. And what we're asking to do is something that's already happening, which is to say, let's at least just make this stuff public and let's have a conversation about it. Let's have a conversation about whether or not this is the right experiment to run, or whether or not this is the right way to approach it. Because when people come into these companies, sometimes you might be a little bit skeptical. Well, I ran that thing over there and it showed uplift, and you might be like, well, I don't know. Can I see? Show me the data. Show me the methodology. And of course, that's something you can't do. But what if we could do that publicly? And David, you went out with Levitt and you ran this experiment. I mean, it got me and Dr. Runge. We immediately started a conversation about this. I continually reference it. I've seen unprompted it referenced multiple times inside of the game industry. This is a way to raise gaming industry GDP. And if you join the Experimentation Group, if you collaborate with us, you're not only helping your own product, but you're helping gaming GDP. And if you really care about games, and I know people who work in this industry do give a shit about games, they care about the craft and art of making games. Don't just do this for your company, do this for gaming.
Yeah, and I mean, also for your company, if you're an open company that's sharing things, it's a creative company. It's something that people want to be part of. They want to be there. There's a lot of the best creative people, some of the best people working in the games industry are interested in collaboration, not in some sort of high corporate, like, daring, I'm not going to tell anybody and I'm going to sit in my. A lot of them want to collaborate. They want to share ideas and they want to learn from each other and they want to be in that sort of experience.
So,
Tom, what are we looking for? What are we looking for this crazy experimentation group?
This is a good point. So, if you want to get involved, there are some requirements. So, obviously, you need to be mobile casual game with 10K DAO or more. You need to be able to ship an experiment in 2 weeks or less. And you obviously have to be happy to share your results publicly. And if that sounds like you, if you kind of meet those criteria and you want to be involved and you want to help, you want to understand what your players really want and move the industry forward, then you can find us all on LinkedIn. You can find the Experimentation Group. We've got a company page. You can find us there. We've got our individual profiles. You can hook us up there. Or visit the experimentation.group, which is our website, and you can book a Calendly. You can book a meeting with us there via Calendly.
The experimentation.group.
Yes, the experimentation.group. And it's a very nice website. We've had lots of compliments on it. Go there just to check out how professional it looks.
There'll be a link to it in the show notes and in the YouTube description. Check it out right now down in the comments.
And if you really, really don't want to share because you want to do like your secret things, you don't want anybody to know, you can still talk to us. We don't require complete, the open society view to have a chat. So get in touch if you want to talk about it.
That's true.
We're most interested, I think, in finding out, like we've said over and over again, what do players really want and how can we grow the whole industry together? That's what we really want to know. How can we make this place even more dynamic and even more creative as an industry and keep bringing, great experiences to players?
And even if you're not interested in becoming a part of the experimentation group or collaborating with us, I guarantee you're going to want to follow the things that we're doing. So you're absolutely going to want to check out our LinkedIn page, which we will be sharing a lot of our progress on. And of course, I'm sure we'll be going back to the Game Economist cast, Deconstructor Fund, and Rolling Product Review. This is certainly not the last you've heard of us. It's only the start.
Only the beginning.
I was going to start singing there, but I think let's not do that.
I can do that though, you know.
I mean, trust me, UK Eurovision entries, I think you need it. Oh no. Is this live exit music?
Come join the experimentation group on a romp through what matters to you and your players. And your players. 'Cause maybe you don't know shit. So come on and get with it. Experimentation Group, it's got the method. Anyway,
nothing more needs to be said. What a way to exit.